mean, if you would rather, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome to Great Debates, Power, Politics, and People. This week's topic, presidential primaries, Oklahoma
Never
and
mind.
beyond.
I'll mention to you later. Okay.
With your panelists, Alan Cook, Bill Shapard, Dr. Brett Sharp, Tony Vann, and your moderator, James Davenport.
And they win that primarily, but not exclusively, by getting more votes. And discuss that. But each candidate is definitely, their first goal is to get a majority of delegates to their national convention, which will happen in late July or early August. I'm going to introduce our panelists. As I mentioned, I'm very excited. Before I do that, I also want to recognize some people who are here with us. First of all, President Webb, President of Rose State College. I want to thank you for being here. We have Professor Dawkins, Professor Kuski, also Professor Hotrick is here with us. And then we have Professor Gatliff, and way in the back we have the Dean of Social Sciences, Dr. Ortiz, and our Associate Dean, Dr. Batchoffer. So thank you all for being here with us as well. I'm going to start with Mr. Bill Shapard, who earned his Bachelor's of Business Administration from the University of Mississippi and received his expert level professional research certification from the Marketing Research Association. He's an active member of the American Association of Public Opinion Research and has lectured at Oklahoma State University on polling methodologies, data collection, and advanced likely voter sampling techniques. In addition, he's sought after by Oklahoma media as a political commentator regarding both elections and policy issues within our state. Mr. Shapard founded SoonerPoll in 2004, and it remains Oklahoma's only nonpartisan public opinion research firm. In 2014, SoonerPoll was rated as the best polling firm in the state by Nate Silver's 538 blog, and it also rated in the top 10% of public opinion research firms in the country. In 2015, SoonerPoll began providing a call disposition and rate calculation report with every publicly released poll, which is one of the most aggressive moves towards transparency in the public research industry. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Bill Shapard. Professor of Political Science and advisor for the Public Administration Program at the University of Central Oklahoma. Dr. Sharp earned his bachelor's degree in Political Science and Public Affairs from Oklahoma State University, his Master's of Public Administration and PhD from the University of Oklahoma, and his publications have appeared in the American Review of Public Administration, Administrative Theory, and as the Agency Services Coordinator for the State of Oklahoma Office of Personnel Management. The courses taught by Dr. Sharp include Advanced Public Administration, Ethics in Public Service and Leadership, Leadership and Decision Making, Political Advertising, and the Politics of the New Media, as well as many others. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Brett Sharp. Mr. Tony Vann has more than 20 years of experience in media relations, as well as state and federal government relations and marketing communications and nonprofit administration. He earned his bachelor's of political science at the University of Central Oklahoma. Mr. Vann founded Vann & Associates in 2010. Prior to starting his own company, he was the president of Christian Companion Senior Care, which was a national franchise corporation offering services to seniors in their homes. He grew this company from a startup to more than 32 locations within 7 states. Mr. Vann has also served as the communications director for then Lieutenant Governor Mary Fallin and as the development director for the Oklahoma City National Memorial, where he raised more than $14.1 million. In addition, he has served as the public relations director for the Oklahoma State OKC, and as the legislative assistant to the House Republican leader at the Oklahoma House of Representatives. Mr. Vann also has the distinction, I believe, of being the original creator, or the first creator of a distance learning political science class in the state of Oklahoma. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Tony Vann. Professor Alan Cook is an adjunct professor of political science here at Rose State College. He earned his master's in public administration from the University of Oklahoma. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. I got it wrong.
Yeah,
I'm
fine.
sorry. Anyway, in addition to teaching at Rose, Professor Cook also teaches at Oklahoma City Community College and Mid-America Christian University. He's a member of the Pi Alpha Alpha, which is a national collegiate honor society for public administration and public policy students. In addition to teaching political science courses, Professor Cook has been active in Oklahoma politics, and he owns a successful small business here in the Oklahoma City area. Please join me in welcoming Professor Alan Cook. What I would like to do is start off with Dr. Sharp, who will kind of give us an overview of what he's seeing from his perspective as well. Does that work for everyone? So, Dr. Sharp, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me here. It's a great privilege. I love this campus, and as how lovely this building is, including the bathrooms. Anyway, this is such an interesting election cycle. You know, we sort of say this every year, but I don't think you can have enough hyperbole about how weird this particular election is, and it's complex. Each party kind of sets its own rules, and each state sets its own rules, and each party within a state sets its own rules, and so there's a lot of things going on. On the Republican side, they changed the rules this year, and we're sort of still in the proportional allocation of delegate stage. And starting March 15th, we're going to move to winner take all. And the Republican elites have done that in order to front load a candidate, get somebody pretty quickly. Not dreaming at all that it would be Trump in the lead, so that's kind of interesting right there. Let's see. So we're still in Super Tuesday primary. It's kind of fun. Oklahoma's getting some attention from the candidates. We don't, always do that, but here it's still proportional. And the way that works is if a candidate reaches a certain proportion, like 15 or 20%. Then they may, in Oklahoma it's 15%, then they'll get allocated delegates based on the results. So tonight you should be focused on those numbers, 15%, most of the other states it's 20%. But look at that, because that's the real thing. Trump, I think, might just wipe the table here. I would love to be surprised on that. I have not hidden, I'm sorry. I usually keep my politics way down. I'm pretty moderate, pretty, even road, on this sort of thing. But Trump, I'm sorry if you're a Trump person, but you can at least let me in a box where I'm just sort of dismayed at how far he's gotten. But anyway, it's going to be fun to watch that. On the Republican side, I was looking at the ballot, and those of you who've already voted, you'll remember this. But we had, I can't remember. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 candidates. I think there were 17 candidates on the Republican side starting out. And it was a real different year because a lot of these were A-list candidates, not just sort of, like Rick Santorum is one of the finalists last time, and lots of governors and senators, and really kind of exciting. Carly Fiorina, who I thought sort of dominated the early Republican debates, powerful lady. I can't imagine how she didn't do as well. If you're like me, I was sort of disappointed to find Bush and Clinton on the major tickets. I said, out of 300 plus million people in this country, could we not find somebody without that brand name? Having said that, I'm overwhelmed that Bush, with his money, everybody talks about money in politics, and it just almost proves that it's not everything, which I guess is a little bit reassuring. But to have Bush out of the race so early is interesting. Let's see.
He set a record, by the way, $38 million per delegate vote.
Oh my gosh, that is incredible.
That sets a new record.
That just shows you right there. In fact, I heard some breakdowns. I don't know if you remember, but I don't remember the exact numbers about how much he spent per vote, like in New Hampshire and that those states. So anyway, it's interesting. And on the Democratic side, I was surprised how few A-list candidates, basically one, with Hillary Clinton being on there. Bernie Sanders, I think all the pundits, me included, thought would be kind of interesting, but not really amount to much. If you're on a college campus, live like I do, and I suspect most of you do, you'll hear that vibe, that energy coming from Bernie Sanders, and you'll sort of think that he's going to sweep the state. I don't think that's going to happen, but it does seem from the, including here in Oklahoma, that there's lots of energy there. You don't see that with the Clinton campaign. It's kind of like people sort of doing their duty with Hillary Clinton, but it looks like she's probably, of course I've been wrong through this whole process, so you can discount this, but she'll probably sweep the tables starting today and for the rest of the election cycle. Let's see. Oh, we have other things too, like the Supreme Court coming along, and there's been last-minute things. I have no idea how the Trump thing with the KKK is going to play out. I thought, like early on, some of his comments, like about John McCain's, some of these comments I thought would just be an automatic discount in the Republican side, but the rules have really changed. I think one of the commonalities on both parties is this disaffection of the base. In fact, I've been saying this for a while, that the Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party movement were basically two sides of the same coin, one liberal and one conservative, and they're both sort of this reaction, sort of an appalled reaction to what's going on at the highest levels with Wall Street and corporate America getting in bed, in this crony capitalism, and it really violates all liberal principles and violates all conservative principles. You want to have a market with a fair playing field, and we don't seem to have that right now. And the sort of the establishment, we call the establishment in both parties, have not been very responsive to the citizens on that order. And I think that's one thing that gives Bernie Sanders and Trump, for different reasons. I think Bernie Sanders, very sincere guy, has lots of integrity, lots of charisma. I sort of believe him when he says he's not bought by Wall Street. He's got a track record, going back forever. And Trump, by different logic, he's basically one of the guys that buys politics, and he brags about it. And you sort of trust him that if he gets in there, he's not going to play by the rules either. So you have these two guys, and they're sort of providing a lot of interest. And on the Republican side, I think there's just this overwhelming resentment that two back-to-back midterm elections, Republicans sent historic highs in terms of Senate and especially the House representation, and they basically adopted or acquiesced to the Obama agenda and really put a little more, not even really a symbolic fight, just really didn't do much there. And on the Democratic side, there's sort of I guess maybe the expectations for Obama were so stratospheric that there's probably no way he could live up to that. But after 8 years, there's a little bit of disaffection there, and I think Bernie Sanders is playing into that. But I think I will turn over to my colleagues if you want.
Very good. So let's talk about messaging for a little bit. Who would have thought the coolest thing to come out of Burlington, Vermont, other than Ben and Jerry's, was Bernie Sanders? So we have this guy, middle-aged guy, that comes out of northeast United States, and who does he tap? He taps social media folks. He taps millennials, right? And so basically his key to winning, which I don't know if he's going to win or not, is basically converting the @ symbol to a check mark. And some of you guys may not be old enough, but remember my generation, we had Rock the Vote, which MTV's big Rock the Vote, right? Well, now it seems like it's Tweet the Vote or Facebook the Vote or Like the Vote, right? And so what you're seeing is, in my opinion, a lot of those candidates that are either substantial traditional candidates, such as Jeb or Carly. I mean, I'm with you. I thought Carly was going to hammer it, to be honest with you. They're having trouble catching up with this middle-aged guy from Northeastern with his college kids pushing him back. And so I think there's a revolution in itself there. You look at messaging on the fact that every political debate that we've seen, as far as I know, all the town halls, all of those debates tend to skew to the candidate that has nothing to say. Literally, you have Trump and you have Hillary Clinton, Secretary Clinton, and they're the ones that are supposedly the front runners, but yet Bernie's the one that has these free college and grand ideas, which are fantastic macro ideas, but there's nothing there necessarily to put behind it, as far as I know. Same thing with Trump. Trump comes back and he says, we're going to build a wall, right? Well, apparently Mexico is going to pay for that wall. Now, I'm not sure. I haven't seen how that exchange works. Is that in pesos? I don't know how that kind of works out. But it's 10 feet higher, right? Because there's $8.1 billion to do it. And so it's, who could write the storylines to this? I mean, we literally have, 2 U.S. senators battling, a reality talk show host on one side, which is a joke in itself, right? That is a punchline itself. And then on the other hand, you have Hillary Clinton, who theoretically, I don't know, you guys are more pundits than I am, but who theoretically would not have been outleft by anyone except for, this guy in Vermont, he's run 21 elections, I believe, something like that. He's basically been a career politician the entire time, but yet motivates a younger generation to realize that he's not really a career politician, so vote for me for president, because I'm anti-establishment. Although he's been the mayor of Burlington, Vermont, he held the only congressional seat in Vermont, and now has been a U.S. senator for several terms. So it's a really weird messaging thing here. From my perspective, political messaging is very much like being in a small room and finding an echo. These guys are your echo, right? You guys are your echo. So in other words, how many of you guys have been in, pick it, closet, bathroom, whatever, and you're walking through and you find that one right spot, right? You're talking to your friend and you're blah, 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 and literally it makes you stop, like you step back, right? And you go, echo, echo. Am I the only idiot that's done that? Come on, raise your hand, right? Okay, so we've all done that. Well, that's all the candidates are doing this year, it feels like, is all they're doing is kind of going until they hear your echo. And that echo is through social media, that echo is through voting and polling, and that echo is obviously through fundraising and voting. I saw a piece 2 weeks ago or so that in the Nevada primary, there were more people that came out for Donald Trump by himself than who all of the combined folks that voted in 2012. So that shows you that he's found the echo. Like him or not, he's found the echo. And I think Bernie's done the same on the other side. The other thing is that you've got to, from a political communications perspective, you've got to parlay that into votes. It doesn't matter if you're popular. Now, there may be an argument that Bernie might want to be vice president. That sure is a heck of a gig for him. I don't know. But if he wants to be president, he has to at some point be able to convert those millennials into folks that will actually vote. And I've heard several things about the fact that maybe during some of the primaries, Super Tuesday, it's close to spring break, folks won't be on campus, but there's always the absentee vote, and I think that some people are going to, not see that as a viable option. Other than that, I mean, you've got the other thing, the communication side, and I'm looking at your piece. The guy I voted for wasn't on there, none of the above. It was really disappointing. You've got what I call the two hawks. So you've got Rubio and Ted Cruz. One's trusted, and one's a freshman senator that says he should, has the experience to be president. And they are just hammering away at Trump.
Same thing that Obama said.
Same thing, yeah. Hope and change, and all I've got left is change. So that's a very interesting resonation. The fact is that they're bringing up all of the same communication over and over again. And the fact is that Republicans, like them or not, they seem to be eating their own young. I mean, if we don't get somebody that they like, which is, I think, either Trump or Rubio, Cruz or Rubio, then Trump can't be the candidate, right? Even though
They don't want Cruz either.
well, yeah, they really don't. They want Rubio, right? We want Rubio. That's probably the fact. So no matter what the delegates say, we don't care. And so it's just this really interesting cycle from a political pollster side, from a communication side, and I think fundraising as well. You're talking about such huge numbers of mother's milk of politics. I mean, let's face it, cash runs politics. It just does. And yet you've got a guy that supposedly has his own, he does. He has his own plane. He supposedly hasn't taken any money. I don't know if that's true or not. And yet he's the one on the Republican side winning. And Hillary, I think she's got the backing of a lot of things, and yet she doesn't seem to be able to overcome Bernie Sanders. So the only other thing I would probably talk about in my entry is watch the commercials. I think this is the first time that I can remember, at least, that Oklahoma has really truly been kind of in the commercial mix. We've actually have been able to see some of the national commercials. The most recent one that I think is very interesting right now is the Johnson Control Hillary Clinton piece. Has anyone ever seen that? Has you seen that one? Yes. Very interesting piece. I don't know of any other time that I can remember a presidential candidate going on in front of the headquarters of a national corporation, basically calling them out. So it's very interesting to me. So other than maybe Donald Trump again saying that carrier's gone to Mexico and we got to get those jobs back.
What do you think about Trump and his sort of free media he gets all the time? This television, not paying for. It's interesting to watch.
Well, he's smart. I mean, that's, the fact is that all of those candidates are dying for free media, right? That's the whole point. The less you spend on media, the more you can spend it on something else. And, once again, it's a calculated risk. I've heard a lot of folks say that they didn't think that, Trump joined just to help his, his business side or his corporations, or Trump really didn't want to be president, so on and so forth. At some point, that's either got to, stop or go. I mean, in November, if Trump becomes the president-elect, it's not like he can just walk away and get on his plane and fly back to Canada. I mean, at some point, you're going to have to assume the office or figure it out. And at this point, at least, it appears that he's going to, move towards Oklahoma. Right, Bill?
Well, we can talk about it.
Let's go.
Well, I have before me my last poll that I did for News 9, News on 6, the two CBS affiliates. In all honesty, James, I could teach an entire class about this one piece of literature right here. So how much time do we actually have to kind of talk these openers?
You talk, and if you go too long, I'll cut you off.
Okay, you just say stop, please. Stop. So we did our last poll Tuesday through February of last week, and it just so happens that David Holt, who is the chairman for the Rubio campaign, is my neighbor. And so he texted me and he asked me, he says, Bill, when's your last poll? And I told him, and he goes, oh my gosh, there was a debate Thursday night. There was Tom Coburn has since endorsed the Hobby Lobby endorsement. And he says, make sure you let everybody know that your numbers are not reflective of those things. And I said, David, if I was going to poll when nothing politically was happening, that's like a Friday morning between 10:30 and 11:45. And you just can't do that. The polling does not work that way. We need a solid 3 days. And so we're living in an environment where I think the polls are adversely impacted right now by the calendar itself. I mean, 30 years ago, there wasn't a debate before almost every primary. We've had 10 debates so far. I think this is all fed into Donald Trump's persona because it gives him more opportunity to say more outlandish things. And now you've got CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, which you didn't have any of these things 30 years ago. And they're all now wanting a piece of the pie and a piece of opportunity to put Donald Trump up there and hope that he says something that gets them some more viewership. I mean, it's all about viewers. It's all about eyeballs. So we're living in more of a different time politically. I would say that from this polling, and let's talk Republicans first in this poll. My poll, if you throw out the undecideds, which is about 13%, and that's what we like to do on the last poll, so we can kind of see where those numbers will land. Donald Trump's at 38%. He's been between 30 and 35 since we started polling 6 months ago. And again, Dr. Sharp is right. Every time he said something, it was people like me and him and probably everybody else that went, okay, he's going to drop now. And he never did. And I'm going to get to the reason why I think that was happening. And again, that's what polling should do. Polling is not to tell us how to vote. It's really not to just tell us why, what's going to happen. I'm not a prognosticator. I don't have a crystal ball. Really what polling is designed to do is to tell us why this is happening. Why is Donald Trump doing so well? Why is Bernie Sanders coming to Oklahoma in the last week and spending so much money? So the polling is to tell us why things are happening. And so Donald Trump's at 38. I don't think that he will break 40% tonight. I think that there is too much going on with Rubio and Cruz in which to keep that from happening. Rubio spiked in our last poll up to 21%. He's going to land probably around 24, I think, tonight. It'll still be a 10-point spread, and that will probably be the story tonight is, again, Donald Trump won, another state by double digits, and that seems to kind of be the repeating theme. Cruz, however, has dropped. He was at a high of 25. He's dropped down to 18%. I'm the only poll right now that's come out of Oklahoma that shows Cruz coming into third place, and so many people have asked me, well, why is that? So interesting enough, in our polling, when we look at Ted Cruz, he was among those that were looking for the most conservative in the race. That was him. When we were asking about evangelicals, believe it or not, I want everyone to guess, who do you think won the evangelical vote and the Republicans in my last poll?
In the last poll?
In this last poll.
I would hate to say Trump.
Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump. And there's probably nothing evangelical about him.
Exactly.
So what does that mean? Why is that, right? So the point is, I think that what's happened is that maybe Ted Cruz, his own personal convictions is that of a solid conservative who is a Christian and would attract an evangelical voter. But he put together a campaign team that was anything but. And I don't think these two things mix. So we saw this going into Iowa, where he put out literature that said it was a voter violation if you didn't show up and vote, right? And then we saw where they spread a rumor that Ben Carson had gotten out of the race, who was another big evangelical candidate. And so then, when we got to South Carolina, guess what happened? The talk was that Ted Cruz couldn't win the evangelical vote there. So what has happened since South Carolina all the way to now is the fact is that evangelicals have looked and said, look, I like Ted Cruz maybe, but his campaign has been involved in some questionable campaign tactics. And so that just does not fly with them. That's not something that they're interested in. So now the question is, why it's going to Donald Trump? I think it's because that they are now thinking, well, if I'm not going to vote my evangelical values, I need to find something else. And so they're looking for other things that they're voting. They just happen to tell pollsters like me that I'm an evangelical voter. So that's what I think is happening here, particularly with Ted Cruz, and the reason why he has fallen. The other two candidates are in single digits. So what does this say? Let me tell you something. Usually as a pollster, I like asking issues. Which candidate do you think is the best with regard to immigration? Which do you think is the best candidate with regard to foreign policy or the economy and jobs? None of that is in here. None of it. Because that's not what kind of election this is this year. So what questions did I ask? After you told me who you were going to vote for in the Republican side, I asked, how angry are you at the federal government? Would you say you're very angry? Would you say you're dissatisfied but not very angry? how would you describe that? This gave us an insight, because I think that what we are looking at is that I think all of the candidates would have said at the beginning of this year that anger is a part of this year's election. But the only person who seemed to know the real depth of the river was Donald Trump, because he began to channel that anger and make that part of why he was running, and just the kind of the just unhappiness with the current administration and the federal government. Among those that were, and I should probably tell you some of these numbers, among those that were said that they were very angry in the Republicans, Donald Trump Donald Trump got 34% of that group. Even among those that said they were dissatisfied, he got 34%. Again, this is the pluralities. That was the largest percentage of any of the other candidates. So again, if you're angry, you see that your candidate is Donald Trump. So now let's talk about the Tea Party, because as we've seen over the last 8 years, the far right has been the ones that are very angry. Ted Cruz has been that candidate, that Tea Party candidate. Guess what? In this poll, Donald Trump won both the people who can see themselves as Tea Partiers, and he won the people who were not Tea Partiers. So how did that happen? The way I look at it is that group of Tea Partiers and the people that were angry overlap very much so. So what happened is, instead of going directly after the Tea Party vote, what Donald Trump said is, I'm going to channel that anger and I'll get them through that process. So again, those are two things that I think are really driving it. One of the others is we asked this for now both sides of the ballot. We asked, what is the most important thing you're looking for in a candidate? The most conservative, who can win in November, or who will bring about the most change? So what do you, of those three, which do you think Republicans said that they were looking for most?
Who will win?
No, that was third. Who will bring the most change? Believe it or not. Now again, what do you think Democrats said? The most liberal or progressive? The one that would bring the most change, or who will win in November?
Who will bring the most change?
Who will bring the most change? That's absolutely right. The reason why, and this is what frustrates probably pundits and people in the news media and everything else, is that they're all looking to that next election. Okay, so you can win a primary, but guess what? You may lose in the general election, and then you basically lost anyway. It's a moot issue. The point is that the electorate's not looking for that. They're looking for who will bring the most change. And guess what? Donald Trump won that as well. Let's see, where's that one? I want to give you that number. Who will bring the most change? 44%. Cruz was at 14%. Rubio was at 17%. Now, believe it or not, those that were looking for the most conservative candidate said Ted Cruz. Those that were looking to win in November, Marco Rubio. So as you can see, but the problem was, as I said earlier, it seems like the only person that knew what this election was going to be about was Donald Trump. Because why would you want to go after just 16% of the vote that's looking for how to win in November? Why would you go after the 20% that are looking for the most conservative? Why not go after the 60% that are wanting to bring the most change? And so that's what Donald Trump was able to capture. He won men, he won women, he won every congressional seat, he won every age group. Okay? So I ask another question, and maybe this one is much more telling, which is, who do you want? Do you want a candidate with prior strong, and that's the word I use, even though that may be a biased word. I mean, I'm trying to front load this, and you'll see why. Strong prior government leadership experience, or you want somebody outside the establishment? Okay. And what do you think won?
Outside.
By 2-1. 2-1 margin. So when you see Donald Trump stand up there with all those other politicians and say, hey, these guys are politicians. They make promises. All right, I'm a successful businessman. I get things done. I build buildings. This is what I do for a living. That resonates with people. They're tired of listening to that same old thing. They want the outsider. Now, I think that my 14-year-old daughter last summer could have told you that the Republicans were looking for an outsider. But why didn't the other candidates try to channel that? Okay, so maybe you can't do that if you're Rubio, but you've just been up there 2 years. You're Ted Cruz. You don't have any friends in the U.S. Senate. You've been an outsider, even though you're a member of the U.S. Senate. You could channel that. At least that's what I'm thinking. And maybe Tony can give some thoughts as to why they ran into these same ruts of being the same old politician, because that's not what this election is all about. So that is That's the Republicans. I mean, that's why I think what's turning out is the way it's out. So now let's talk Democrats real quick. I haven't taken too much time, man.
No, you're good.
Okay, so let's talk Democrats, because I really thought this might be just a sleepy time for the Democrats on the other side. We've seen, like in Nevada, you know, a state that put Harry Reid into the U.S. Senate, 12,000 Democrats voted in that caucus, 75,000 Republicans voted. We've seen the Republicans turn out and set records in turnout, and we've seen the Democrats almost set records in turnout as well, but at the other end. So there's so much more interest and excitement on the Republicans. I talked to the state election board just last week, and I said, what are you seeing as far as people changing parties? And she says, well, because we are a strong closed primary system and you have to be registered with that party, up until February the 5th, which was the deadline, we saw a lot of Democrats wanting to become a Republican. And I said, well, why are you seeing that? She says, because they're telling us they want to vote for Donald Trump. All right? They said, what about independents? They want to vote for Donald Trump. So we saw some micro trends in kind of that, because we can kind of project that to what the turnout will be. Now, again, as a pollster, I have science, which I follow, but then there's also an art that I must marry with it. And that art is determining what the turnout will be. And so anytime that as pollsters we were wrong, it's pretty much because we were unable to effectively determine what the turnout was going to be. So Republicans are pretty easy. If you look at all the polling online right now, Real Clear Politics or 538, you'll see that from the Republican side, we're pretty much all in the same place, okay? We're all within margin of error of each other. But, and I will mention this during this, a university from New Jersey came and polled in Oklahoma. I've never seen them poll here before. Let me back up. Let's talk about my poll. My poll has shown Hillary Clinton been leading Bernie Sanders for the last 6 months. He started at 12, he went to 28, and now in this last poll I show him probably going to finish about 45, 46%. I still think it's about a 6-point race to Hillary's advantage. Monmouth University comes to Oklahoma. They run a sample of 300, random digit dial, and they come back and say Bernie by 5. So tonight, either they're going to be right or I'm going to be right, okay? And so, so why is this? Well, let's see. How do I say this? Polling, their poll ran after my poll, and so let's just go on the basis that both of us are right, okay? I had 29% undecided in the Democrat primary. Now that is literally unheard of for a week out from a major election. This is not running for county commissioner. This is running for president, okay? And 1 in almost 3 Democrats was undecided. Hillary Clinton's been in the public eye since 1992. She's probably has the best resume of anybody running for president in any kind of political modern history, okay? So they know who she is. And for 6 months, I've had 1 in 3 up to 40% telling me that they're undecided. So that tells us, if anything, that Hillary is really seen as the incumbent in this race. Bernie Sanders, as you all know, is a 74-year-old white socialist, okay? And so when I look at the undecideds in Oklahoma for the Democrats, they're predominantly in the 2nd district, which is a rural district, Little Dixie, and they'll predominantly identify themselves as conservative. So I'm asking myself the question, how could conservatives then vote for a 74-year-old white socialist? It does not make sense, okay? And then, again, we'll talk about the youth vote here, because I know there's a lot of youth in the room, and I'm probably going to hurt your feelings with some of the things that I will say, but I'm a pollster. I like to tell, I shoot straight. I tell it the way it is.
Better you than me.
Yeah. You did a great job. You pumped
Millennial!
them up. You made them feel good about themselves. I'm going to throw a wet blanket on that, Tony.
Sweet me!
but so that being said, if that 29%, there's a portion of them are just not going to vote. And we would think that conventional wisdom would tell us that a higher proportion of the undecideds would break for Bernie Sanders being or appearing as the challenger in this race. The problem is, though, is that almost 50 to 55% of those undecided were conservative in nature. So I really can't see that happening. In my polling, Hillary won men and women. She won every congressional seat. She won, the only thing that is a difference is age. So let's talk about that for a minute. If you were 50 or older in my poll, you favored Hillary Clinton, and if you were 49 or younger, you favored Bernie Sanders. That's the only ones that Bernie won. So we can see from the polling that Bernie's going to do well, and we know this anecdotally from other places in other states, right? So let's talk about Oklahoma. A lot of people have been critical of my polling in the past because they say, Bill, you don't have enough young people in your sample. This sample right here had 1 in 10 were under the age of 34. Now some of you may think that's low, but guess what? The computer, when I ask it to tell me what it should be, it comes back and says 3%. Now that's just the realities. And I then tripled it in an effort to make sure that if there was great turnout, Bernie would be representative and his votes would be represented in this poll, okay? Now, the Tulsa World has basically done independent market research, or research last summer that vindicated me in aspects, because they came back and basically said, and if anyone has seen that article, you can look it up, but they basically came back and said, hey, guess what? For the last 8 years, people under the age of 34 haven't been voting. And that's just the realities. It's just not the realities. You cannot get people under the age of 34 to turn out. Now, I had before me a couple of days ago a student from the University of Oklahoma shooting some video wanting to talk about the millennial vote. And I told her this harsh reality as well, is because every year they come to me and they say, now, do you think the millennials will turn out this year? Do you think they will? You know what? I am a person who tries to read prior behavior as a key indicator of future behavior. And in that being said, no, I don't believe that will happen. Now, let's talk about that. Let's say it does happen. Those under the age of 34 in this state, half of them are registered Republican. You see, in a nation, when you look at those under the age of 34, all right, we know that they predominantly are liberal, predominantly are registered Democrat. But Oklahoma is not like that. So if you're outside of the state of Oklahoma, and looking at Oklahoma and thinking, oh my gosh, independents can now vote with Democrats. Oh my gosh, we can mobilize all these young people and we can turn them out for Bernie Sanders. The problem is half of them are registered Republican. They can't vote for Bernie unless they change parties. So these are just some of the realities. Now let's talk about independent voting for a minute. Independents have been, for the first time historically, able to vote for in the Democrat primary, okay? I talked to independents for the last 6 months. So let's look at it this way. Independents are about 17% of all registered voters. But on election day, which I call the electorate, on election day, they're only 6% of the electorate. So they underperform their registration, while Democrats and Republicans over. Now, I think this is a function that we live in a closed primary system. In that closed primary system, you have to be with a party in which to vote for that in those elections. Independents look at it and go, you know, I don't really associate as a Democrat, I don't associate as a Republican, so I'll be an independent. And they're okay with not having that primary. We even help them compensate for their scoring in our system, so that way, if they do show an interest in voting, that they at least can compete against Republicans and Democrats. So what happens is that I believe that independents in this state are more apolitical than anything. They don't really have an interest in politics. They just registered with a party because at some point they were asked, or they thought that they should be registered, and they vote at a lesser percent. That being said, when I started talking to that 6% and saying, well, what's your interest in voting for the Democrat? I got, in the Democrat primary, I got less than 40% showing any interest at all. Now, is that because they don't want to vote in a primary, or they're looking at Hillary and Bernie and going, I have no interest in those? Now, Bernie Sanders, a month ago, came and ran a big mailing piece to independents and going, you can vote for the first time, blah, blah, blah. Well, I can see from a national perspective, them looking at independents in Oklahoma and thinking, well, they probably lean to the left than to the right. And guess what? When I look at the political spectrum from liberal to conservative among independents, they pretty much mirror the rest of us as a whole. They're just right of center. So the point is that then trying to talk them into voting for either a 74-year-old white socialist or a Hillary Clinton, I think is a hard sell. So the point is that I think that what we're seeing overall is just, and that's what I think feeds into that disinterest in voting in Democrats, and I think that's why the voting turnout will be lower for Democrats. So that's what I've gotten. I'm sticking to it. So go ahead. I'm sorry, I took too much of your time.
No, you're good. You got plenty of time. Yeah.
I'm supposed to talk? My name is Alan Cook. I'm an adjunct professor here at Rose State, and what a great room, by the way, right? And this is amazing. Dean, can I have my class? in here next semester. I actually have some students here today, just a few. I should have offered this as extra credit. I probably would have had some more, right? But anyway, really glad to be here and get to talk about this. Man, these guys are so have so much knowledge, and it's really fun to listen to them. This process is so amazing. Like they've already said, this year is so much different than so many other presidential primaries. The dynamics of it are so different. And Donald Trump has really thrown a wrench into all of that. The one thing I teach my students about the primaries is the primaries aren't even real. They're not even in the rule book. We just made them up. The political parties made them up after we've been a nation for a long time. We didn't have primaries in most places in the United States till the 20th century. And, there's some really interesting historical occurrences that happened because of that. The 1824 election is my favorite. Anyone know about the corrupt bargain? 1824? Yeah. So the Democratic Republicans, which that's a political party, it's not the Democrats or the Republicans. Different party. Democratic Republicans, they had 4 candidates in the general election. There was no primary. And so they actually split the electoral votes, and for the last time this ever happened, almost 200 years ago, the House of Representatives had to decide our presidency because no one got a majority of the electoral college. And they didn't have a primary. And so that's what we got, and that's how, John Quincy Adams got it over Andrew Jackson. It was a huge, huge scandal, right? But concerning this primary, it's going to be really interesting looking forward. There's a lot of people saying that today is so important. There's so many states up for grabs today, and it really could be really important if things fall a certain way. If Hillary Clinton sweeps, mathematically it's going to be very, very tough for Bernie Sanders to come back from that. Same thing with Donald Trump. If he sweeps or even gets close to it, which some polls show that's possible, it's going to be really hard mathematically to come back from that. However, you hear some candidates, including Marco Rubio, saying, you know what, it's not all about winning. It's not all about getting first states, because we've only had 16 states after today had their primary. There's still a lot of states left. And like we already know, after March 15th, all of those states become winner take all. So Marco Rubio said, if I can finish second in a lot of these states, maybe win a couple of them, and I can at least be competitive on the delegate count, then as we move on down the road and we get to some states that have winner take all allocation of their delegates, then I can be right back in this thing. California has their primary June 6th, I think. That's a long ways away. And I think California has 172 delegates up for grabs. We only need, is it 1,100 to win the Republican nomination? I think it's 1,100 delegates in the Republican system. And it's worth 172. That's almost a fifth the way to victory in that one state, and that's a long ways away. So you have guys like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, and even Carson and Kasich. They've come out and said this too. We can grind this out, and there's still a lot that can happen, and that's especially true if today is split up at all. If Rubio and Cruz find themselves in the lead in a few states, finish second in some others, and mathematically they can keep it competitive, this could go on for a long time. And same with the Democrats. If Bernie Sanders does better than some of the polls say he's going to do today, this thing could go for a long time, and it could be May, June before we really get a much clearer picture. And then I think moving on past that, something we've already talked about a little bit, I think this is going to be so interesting. Most of the polls that I've seen, the national polls, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the Republican candidates like Rubio and Cruz beat Hillary head to head in a lot of the polls. And so you have a lot of Republicans saying, don't waste your vote on Carson or Kasich. We got to get behind one of these guys so we can get Trump out of the way, because that's our best chance of winning in November. Because in a lot of the polls, Trump loses to Hillary head to head. But I think that's going to change. I'm not a Trump supporter, but I think it's going to change because, and there's actually been some polling on this and a lot of anecdotal evidence that points toward it, that there's a lot of young people that are drawn to Bernie Sanders for a reason. And if he loses, if it becomes clear, or if Hillary Clinton gets the Democrat nomination, a lot of those young people, for the same reasons they're drawn to Bernie Sanders, they're going to be drawn to who? Donald Trump. They really will. There's been anecdotal evidence of young people being interviewed talking about this. They're voting for Bernie Sanders. They're looking at him as an anti-establishment type of a person. That's what draws them to him. The excitement, the rallies, the anti-establishment. He's an outsider. And so once he's out, a lot of them are going to say, I don't want Hillary. She's the most establishment as they come. Donald Trump, man, he's got the excitement. He's the outsider. I'm going to go for him. And so I think the polling is going to change once, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I don't know. I think we could see a shift in that polling, and that Trump versus Hillary contest be really, really close in November. Not saying that that's going to be the outcome, but today, obviously, we'll get a lot clearer picture of that. I'm just really excited about today. I can't wait. I'll probably be here at Rose State. If you have nowhere to be tonight, come to the what's it called?
Watch party, yes.
Yeah, but what's the building? The student
Clubhouse.
center, the clubhouse, the village. Yeah. I told some of my students in class last night. I said, if you don't have anywhere tomorrow to go watch the results, if you're interested in this and you want to go be a part and watch TV as the results come in and be around people that are interested, come to the village. The clubhouse at the village tomorrow night. And what's the first thing they asked?
What kind of food?
What kind of food, yeah. What kind of food are they going to have? That's exactly right. So, kind of funny, but they'll have some
food
food.
are they going to have?
Answer the question.
You're right. Slices of American cheese and fig Newtons.
Better than building that.
But, yeah, they'll probably have good food. So anyway, come there tonight. It'll be fun. But I'm really excited about that. I'm excited to see what's going to happen. And what a great, for my students that are here, what a great semester to take American federal government. The fall would probably be better, but oh well, this is a good one too. Just kidding. So anyway, yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. We're going to open this up for you guys to ask. And I have for students, the first 4 students that ask questions, we actually have a small little gift for you. So, so when you raise your hand to ask your question, you're called on. Make sure you state your name so I can make sure I give the right people. All right. So we're going to start with Professor Dawkins, and then we'll go to there, and then we'll come up there next. All right, and then we've got you two.
So the one thing that you guys didn't talk about was something that I'm excited about, and that is that the Libertarian Party appears to be on the ballot in Oklahoma and in other places. And I'm wondering how third-party dynamics might affect this election cycle. In the past, will it be the same? Do you think disaffected voters that you spoke of that don't like Bernie will be drawn to other third-party or independent candidates, and will that have a greater impact than it has in the past?
Well, I can speak that if Trump and Hillary are the front leaders and Bloomberg or somebody got in, and I live off these 32-ounce styrofoam cups, so he wouldn't have been my favorite, but I would be strongly considering something else. But on the Libertarian side, it's like the Republicans have kind of absorbed that with Rand Paul, and that kind of dead-ended. But I've been a critic of our ballot access rules here in this state for a long time, and been disappointed that Libertarians had made better inroads on getting that rule changed.
I mean, from a messaging standpoint, I think you have to look at, like you say, the system itself. I mean, maybe I'm going to offend people now. Millenniums, yes, but Libertarians, the reality is, you listen to Bill's numbers. You've got, would you say, 17% of the electorate are independent, and they skew to 6%. Let's be honest. If we go in to a system where it is a two-party system, and believe me, I've been around long enough where the Democrats were in charge. When I was in the legislature, there were 31 Republicans and 60 some odd Democrats, right? And so when I was a Republican leader's assistant, basically I'd go in and whack my head on the wall every single time, because you weren't ever going to get legislation, and you weren't ever going to get anything done. You didn't have any chairmanships. You were nothing. You were filling a spot. So that's kind of the way the Libertarians and, quite frankly, some of the independents are. You can do it for principle's sake. I voted by principle today because, quite frankly, I feel like I'm going to get a redo in November to vote who's going to win. And I think that's kind of where the Libertarians are as well. I don't have the exact figures, but I have a lot of contacts in Colorado. and there's a huge shift for third parties, specifically libertarian, having to do with the marijuana issue as well as others. You know, they're finding themselves in kind of a similar position that power vacuums are filled by power, right? So it's economic, political, social. And so, you know, there's a part of Colorado, northeastern Colorado, that is becoming a highly conservative area. And those folks originally, I think, self-identify themselves as libertarians. They just want to be left alone, right? Well, now they're self-identifying themselves as Tea Party and eventually reactionary and probably Republican at some point. And so the reality is, and Bill is probably the best, although Sharp might be as well, but politics isn't in a vacuum. I mean, I think that's one of the things we forget is like just these snapshots, just like Senator Holt. I mean, the messages are changing, numbers are changing, people are changing, and you know, Donald Trump, you know, you guys have seen it. In 2004, he said he identified closer with Democrats, right? 12 years later, he is the double-digit potential winner of the Republican primary in Oklahoma and probably nationwide. Things can change.
And he may be a libertarian, we just don't know.
We have no idea, right?
I don't think libertarians would agree.
Right.
Well, I don't think the Republicans or Democrats will claim him either.
Yeah. I mean, just think of it this way. We save money because Air Force One will be stocked at least for 4 years because we'll have the Trump 767 flying around. It'd be cool, right? I mean, we don't need that anymore.
I did think that his wife's interview on CNN, I don't know how many people saw that, but it looked like they were interviewing the Shah of Iran. In the white chairs with all the gold trim on the chairs. I mean, somebody's not standing behind the camera and going, okay, the optics here are wrong. This doesn't, I mean, they didn't have Tony Vann. See, that's the problem. They didn't have Tony Vann there to go, no, this is not the place to shoot it. Melania, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not the political scientist on the panel, but I will say that I think that our system does not lend itself to the creation of a third party. If you look to places in England or Europe for that matter, where they draw districts and then they will have more than one person elected from that district at that time, it lends itself to having more than one party participate. And so that's the way you have it. We have one congressional district and then we have an election for one person to win it. And that means that 2 people will end up running against it. So I think that plus the ballot access, which is Dr. Sharp, and closed primary system, that it doesn't lend itself to the creation of a third party. Now we've seen Ross Perot come along and try to fund something. We've seen Ralph Nader run and he scares the Democrats, and then of course libertarians are running and scaring the Republicans. So the point of the matter is that I think that the creation of a third party is something that in American politics today is just kind of a pipe dream. It's just not going to ever be able to realize unless we change the way the system works.
And it's ineffective. Think about Jesse Ventura in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he went really fast and he was, you know, independent governor. But you got to make bargains. I mean, I don't want to sound like Donald Trump, but you know, we got to win and win big on this deal. I mean, you got to make some compromise, and government is about compromise.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way. None of us have talked about this, but there is a difference between being a candidate for president and being president. And at some point, that's where the rubber hits the road. And if you're an independent or a libertarian and you go up to Washington, D.C. and you have no friends, how are you ever going to pass an agenda? Because you've promised the electorate to do this, and you have no ability to do that. Or very little, excuse me.
There is real serious talk, though, about the Republican side, if Trump becomes the standard bearer, that they'll splinter and some of the top elites will create a sort of Republican Party in exile. And that might be another...
That's what I was kind of referring to.
And that would also open up for other parties. We don't live in a proportional system except for this sort of primary. Everything else is winner take all. And I think mathematically we'll converge back again to one party or 2 parties, which is, you know, regionally or nationally, that's kind of what we've done. But you know, there might be a generation or so where things are a little bit more wide open, and libertarians could make a move in some way.
It's really up to the millennials. I think it's just
Yeah.
whatever you guys want, whatever.
We had a question behind. Yes.
Sorry, I'm running a Betancourt. So the biggest thing that I've seen behind Bernie Sanders, this is kind of for me too, is that we're looking at college education and how it's rising and such, and you know how if you want to get ahead, you're gonna have to pay more for that. And so we're not necessarily looking for a free college, just an affordable college. But let's say he drops. Let's say he doesn't win. Let's say we're looking at Hillary and Trump. Do you think? What I'm thinking is it's probably going to become a matter of well, since no one else is standing for this and all people are rallying for it, we're going to grab it up and we're just going to plaster it on our billboard along with everything else that we're going for. So what do you think it's going to, do you think it's going to become one of those things where if I say it, I'm going to gather all the people that are now looking for someone else to vote for? Does that make sense?
I think even if Bernie Sanders doesn't win, what he's done is brought that issue up, and so that issue is not going to go away. And so we're going to see the free college or the college subsidies that discussion continue for a long time. So even if he loses, he could claim a victory at least for his agenda, that he at least brought some of these things to the forefront. I think even 4 years ago, 8 years ago, socialism, I mean, you wouldn't claim that. There's no way you're going to be elected. He's embracing it, a form of socialism, and America's never going to be the same. We will never be the same. That's going to influence us for a long time. So I don't know if I answered your question correctly, but I think the free college is a controversial issue. But just having it brought up, I think it's not going to go away now.
I've never polled free college, but I assume it would poll very, very well. But in the whole scheme of things, free college isn't really free.
Right. Well,
And so I think that it's great to talk about it, but we have and Dr. Webb, President Webb was here, I'm sure she'd tell you how expensive it is to run this college. And the federal government already in a deficit situation, it just drives them even further. This is what I would say, and that is that the cost of college education really started to increase from an inflationary period back in the 90s when Bill Clinton talked about that we needed to offer better student loans or lower rates in which to get student loans. And just like insurance and healthcare or anything else, anytime you inject money into a particular industry, you're doing nothing in most cases but driving the cost up of that particular good or service. And so by doing so, what has happened is that then as the rates have raised, then it's taken more and more money to either get loans or to get scholarships. In all honesty, I think the free college ought to be offered through more freer scholarships, more freer Pell Grants, things of that nature, because instead of a student having to go out and get a college loan, if we could find where we could tie that with the corporate world, because that's where eventually everyone ends up with a job, I at least hope at some point. The point is that they have the best vested interest in being able to provide a college education at its most inexpensive. And so, again, I'm not a government, solution kind of fella. I look more to the free enterprise in trying to solve that solution before we turn to government.
We have up here.
I have sort of a multi-part question that will affect each of you, and I'd like answers just from all four of you. Who are you each individually voting for? Why, and what would that hypothetically winning candidate's best contribution as president be, in your opinion?
Well, I'll answer first because all I'm going to tell you is I'm not voting for Trump.
And
I'm not telling
That's good enough for me.
Yeah. I might vote for either party, Hillary, or even though I kind of trashed her, I might vote for her, or I'm not really a fan of Cruz. I like Kasich and Rubio and Hillary.
That is a great question. However, I'm not going to answer it. I will answer the second part, which, well, I did give you a hint. I mean, I did not vote for any of the quote-unquote top three. I'll be honest with you. So, and the reason I did that is because I felt like in this process, thank goodness we live in America, right? Which is not a democracy at all. It's a republic, right? And so we have this ability to elect people that we don't even know to go, elect somebody that we don't know, right? I mean, that's really the reality. And so if nothing else, I felt like it was the one time where I got to, scratch in something that I thought, oh yeah, I can look in my mirror and drive to work and be like, he's never gonna win, but yes, that was my vote. And if that candidate should win, although I think Bill has him at something like 8% or something tonight, I think that the most important part is looking at the country as basically a whole. I mean, whether you like it or not, it feels like our nation has become much more fractured. And some of that has to do with along socioeconomic lanes, some of that has to do with ethnic lanes, some of that has to do with age. I mean, I think that there's a huge disconnect between, folks of my generation, baby boomers and millennials and those folks, Gen Ys, and so on and so forth. If anything comes out of this whole process, which this young lady that asked this question about free college, I think the best thing to learn from it, and if a president could do this, which it's kind of like, what's your rocket shot? Like, what is the next big thing for the United States? Is to try to figure out a way how to educate our electorate. How to truly understand, make folks truly understand what the process is, that it's not about cheap shots or snippets. It's truly about, trying to find that niche in the world for the United States to get along, to provide jobs for folks, and for our, free industry, as Bill said, to thrive.
As far as I am concerned, I'm a registered Republican. I've made no bones about that in the past. So, as you know, in a closed primary system, I can only vote for Republicans. But that being said, I could not vote for Bernie Sanders. His socialist values do not fit with my own personal beliefs. I don't think I could pull the trigger for Hillary Clinton. I'm not ready to put another Clinton back in the White House, particularly Bill Clinton. I just think that I'm done with the Bushes and I'm done with the Clintons. I'm kind of telling you, why I'm kind of undecided. It's because what I'm doing is by process of elimination, and I guess that's kind of the way it works. I really do like Kasich. I think as a governor, he's done well in Ohio, and I think that he has a good story to tell. I couldn't vote for Ben Carson. I don't think he has the temperament for it. I couldn't vote for Ted Cruz.
Because Carson's too sweet?
Huh?
He's too sweet.
I think that
he is a nice guy.
He's a nice guy, and I think he's probably very talented and very smart. And I think he would probably surround himself with the kind of people that would be that as well. I just feel like that Carson, what we're looking for is a leader. Okay, we're not looking for the Jeopardy champion. I think he could win Jeopardy out of everybody running, but I mean, that's not, we don't want the Jeopardy champion being president, I mean, I don't think that's what we're looking for. So I think he lacks some of those leadership or presidential leadership skills that I would be looking for. I haven't marked Donald Trump off my list, although I don't agree with a lot of the things that he has said, but I think he has done, I have been at times very angry what's been going on in America. And so, personally, I can see where that's the reason why I feel like he's done an excellent job in channeling that. Could I vote for him at the end of the day? I'm still debating that. I do like Marco Rubio. I think he's acted a little too slow in this campaign. And so, in all honesty, that's who I'm leaning towards, but I just haven't made my final decision.
You got till 7 p.m.
I do, and I plan on voting at that time.
I hope as a professor here it's okay for me to talk about this. I don't tell my classes how I'm registered. I don't tell them how I vote. I don't tell them how to vote. But you asked the question, so I'll answer. I'm a registered Republican. I think the Constitution is a fantastic document. I think we should follow it. I think we've done some horrible things to the Constitution, like the 17th Amendment. I think it was a bad thing, took our federalism out of balance, and we could dive into that all day. So as a strict constitutionalist, the party that's closest to me is the Republican Party. Just because I want liberty, I want limited government. So to your question, I think we are so polarized. More time than, some historians and political pundits, whatever, will say more polarized than we've been since the 60s. And because of that, it makes your choice tougher. I mean, in the 90s, the 90s Democrats are not today's Democrats. You know what I mean? The 60s Democrats were not the 90s Democrats. Very, very different. And same with the Republicans. Everything has changed. Everything always evolves, right? But I found myself in this election just thinking, not who do I think, man, this sounds so bad. I fear that I voted based on politics and not principle. Because what I found myself saying was not, who do I think the best person is on this list? I already voted today. Who is the best person on this list for president? But I found myself asking, who has the best chance to win? And
Is that part of that 16%?
and that's sad. I mean, it really is. I want to label myself as someone who votes for principle, right? Driving away, yeah. Even though I know my guy's not going to win, but that's so. I voted for Marco Rubio. Based on polling, he shows has the best chance of winning in November, and that influenced me a lot. I'll be honest, it really did.
All right. I'll come back to you in just a second.
I do have one question. I'm not a student here, so I can't get your gift. That's okay. But I was curious, Mr. Shapard, how exactly does your polling work? You know, we see all these polls in the media all the time, and I was just wondering what the methodology behind that was.
Well,
she's one of my students at OCCC, by the way, so I'm really proud of that question. It's a really good question.
That's a proprietary question now, so.
No, not really proprietary. I mean, it's on my website. But I'll tell you what, what's on my website is already evolving. It's already changing. I mean, you know, we, for the longest period of time until 2012, we were a landline only, okay? And so we were slow to change to the incorporation of cell phones. But that was not by design, as opposed to that I didn't think Oklahoma needed to incorporate cell phones. You know, if you're in the state of Illinois and you're going to conduct a poll and you call into Chicago, you're going to reach predominantly African Americans, predominantly Democrats, predominantly liberals, and predominantly those with a cell phone. You call downstate Illinois, and it's the exact opposite of that, right? So the point is that that's where a dual frame of landline and cell phones makes the most sense. Here in Oklahoma, we have found that those that are porting directly to a cell phone are no different demographically than the overall population of our state. So it didn't really kind of make a difference in which to be able to have cell phones. Now, we include cell phones now, but I have changed the methodology now to include online and also what we call IVR, interactive voice response, which is where you get that call and it asks you to press 1 for this and press 2 for that. And so I've been thinking that I think the best methodology is to make sure that if we're going to have or minimize our coverage bias, is to be able to use different types of ways to communicate with people. I've taken a look at the landline sample and I've taken a look at the cell phone sample, and guess what? They're pretty much the same. There's not a change in their vote selection or how they feel about certain issues. So, but I still do it though, because I think in 2016 people would be critical of SoonerPoll if we did not include that. But still, for me, landlines is still the best way to reach people. And so that's where we get the most participation. You know, keep in mind that organically the sample that any pollster collects, okay, is naturally, or let's say it's unnaturally representative of the population at whole. When I call, women answer the phone more than men, right? Men sit there and watch the television, and then they just assume she'll answer it. Okay, I mean, these are just realities. Old people participate more than younger people do. Younger people are harder to reach. That's why I think that including an online sample makes the most sense as we move forward. So I'm kind of a chemist of sorts. I'm trying to kind of find the balance, find the thing that eliminates as many biases as we can to get it. Now, this, in comparison to the university poll that came out that showed Sanders by 5, that is a sample of 300 likely voter, landline, and cell phone. That's it. When I looked at my 4 samples and looked at it, Hillary was winning in all 4 of them. So if I felt like that Bernie was doing well in 1 or 2, I think, okay, maybe something's going on here that we need to pay attention to within our sampling. So that's why I stand behind my numbers, and I feel like that I'm still going to be right tonight, although you never know. You never know in this day and age in politics. But our methodologies are always changing, and I'm always trying to kind of find that balance where I can continue to reach people and make sure that everyone's voice is represented in the poll.
Yes.
My name is Daniel Snipes. My question is mainly for, is it Shapard?
Yes.
I was wondering, again, about your polling methodology. So, what age group is polled predominantly? I mean, who are you speaking to for the most part?
Yeah, I'll break that down. In fact, let me just read it to you for Republicans. And it's probably going to shock some people in here, and they're going to go, oh, well, you know. But I will be honest with you. 43% of this particular poll of Republicans is age 65 and up. 36% ages 50 to 64. 15% 35 to 49, and 5.5% 18 to 34. Now, that's what it is. I'm not trying to leave out the youth vote, but the youth don't vote. I mean, that's just the way it is. See, I'm able to I have a database of every registered voter in the state of Oklahoma. And I'm working with a political science professor at OU, Keith Gaddy. We built a algorithm to give a score to everybody based upon a variety of issues, including voter history. And so I'm a firm believer that recent voting behavior is a key leading indicator of future behavior, and that's what we're talking about with polling, and then what will happen in the next election. And so when I ask the computer, say, okay, here's everyone that voted, now come back and tell me who those people were, it comes back and tells me that 5% of the population that voted is under the age of 34. That's the reason why it is what it is. If young people started voting more, they'd become more and more representative in my polling. In the Democrats, it even gets worse. It even gets worse. But I did not weight this particular poll by party or by age, as I said earlier. 9.6% of the Democrats is ages 18 to 34. I left that organically alone because I feel like that the youth vote will turn out at a higher rate, and I wanted to make sure that that was representative. But still, that a lot of people could criticize me for saying only 9% of the entire poll is 34 and younger, and it is what it is.
I'll get to you first, and then I'll come back there.
I'm Scott Charlton. I have a question. In light of the newest thing that's going on now is allowing illegals to vote. There's a big push for that. So it kind of blows everything so far out of the water, I would think, because of the numbers. And it's just kind of an open panel question. How do you feel it's going to affect the election? Or could it?
Illegals can
You
vote?
mean illegal aliens?
Yeah, that's a big thing that's being pushed.
I'm not aware of it either.
In Oklahoma, they
It
would.
is unconstitutional, but the Obama administration has been pushing it, and California's been offering it.
How do they show up with an ID and vote?
That's the whole question.
My question to you would be, where are you hearing this? I bet you it's...
At least in Oklahoma, we have a voter ID law, so you have to produce either a driver's license or your voter ID card. Those are two of the possible IDs, right? And so, I don't know, but I think it would be hard in Oklahoma for that.
It seems like it'd be hard everywhere simply because of what it is, but that's the news I keep reading.
Well, in Chicago, they've been doing that for years. They'd be dead. It doesn't really matter, right?
Back in the back, yes. Yeah, no, you're. Yes. Sorry.
Okay, I'm Ashley Plumley. I'm not very well versed in politics, but
Neither are we.
The Sanders campaign seems very reflective with the excitement and everything of the original Obama campaign. And with Obama being younger, do you believe that Bernie Sanders, with his career, has the ability to make change in America that he promises? Because I feel like everybody voted on Obama because they were tired of the Bush, and so they voted on these promises that in turn really haven't happened. So do you think Bernie Sanders has the ability to make that happen?
No.
No?
Because most of the things that he wants to do would take congressional action, and I think Republicans, there's a good chance, at least according to polls, that they're definitely going to hold on to the House in this midterm election, this presidential election, and most likely the Senate. And if anything, history has shown us that when we elect a liberal president who kind of pushes the envelope a little bit, in the midterm 2 years later, Republicans actually see gains. We saw this 2 years after Clinton's election. We saw this 2 years after Obama's election. And so Bernie, I think what would happen is in his first 2 years, you have a lot of Americans that would really be like, man, we don't want this. Maybe, I'm speculating.
Yeah.
And then in 2 years, I think you could see Republicans just increase their lead in Congress, which would just make it very, very tough for Bernie Sanders to do a lot of what he wants to do. You can't executive action your way to universal health care.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's got to be congressional approval there. So,
Well, my question is back to you. What do you think he's going to do? I mean, I know free school, right?
Yeah, just
but
like
what else has resonated with you?
I'm not sure. I mean, I've really just been looking into everything this past week, and I went to the I Side with, and I'm just like personal opinions and like policies and stuff that affect just
who'd you get on I Side with?
90% Bernie Sanders. So I'm like, obviously I still don't agree with everything, but you know, but then I was looking at it and just thinking about it, and I'm like, it's so much like Obama that I'm like,
It's
he
like,
has a longer political career, which I thought might
it-
give him some backing, but I feel like he just has these great ideas that are bringing awareness.
it's like Obama except for two major differences. One is that he's 74 years old. And second of all is that there's the African American vote is not with Bernie Sanders. So those are two major differences that make, I think, Barack Obama stand out in 8 and 12 that wouldn't for Bernie Sanders. Now, this may hurt some feelings in this room, but we do poll the Democrat primary, but the Democrats in their party rules have super delegates. They have this group that basically have more power, more votes in their pocket than the rest of the Democrats' electorates in states. So it's kind of like it's already decided, you know? I mean,
That's how Hillary lost New Hampshire by 30%, but still got more delegates than Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you justify that. Now, again, it was mentioned earlier is that the voting for president is a modern political phenomenon. I guess you could call it a phenomenon, because people didn't pick president 100 years ago. It was done by the parties at their conventions. And so we've added the popular vote at a state-by-state basis to the entire process, and that was what was mentioned earlier. The problem is that the Democrats, and you know what, the Democrats may be the smartest ones at the end, because the Republicans now are maybe stuck with Donald Trump and wish that they had super delegates, right? But the point is that the Democrats really, I think, undermine the Democrats voting in each state, because really they're sitting back and going, if we don't like what you picked, we can overrule that. And I think that's un-American in my opinion. I think it's undemocratic, for at least it can be characterized that way. So, you know, Bernie Sanders is running a race, I think, basically to promote his agenda, promote his policies. I think he knows in his heart that he's not going to get elected or win a nomination.
All right. We're going to need to wrap up. I have some gifts for our panelists, which I'm going to hand out here in a second. I also want to again thank everyone who attended. We need to thank our sponsors for this. This project is being funded through a grant from the John Templeton Foundation that has been given to us through the Institute for Humane Studies, and I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge our gratefulness for that support. And want to thank our panelists. I'm sure if you have other questions you'd like to ask them, you might be able to corral them in a corner somewhere and beat them up with some more questions. And we also want to mention that we have our survey. So we did a survey by paper last time. This survey is now online, and how are we going to let them know about that? So, okay, so we've got a URL code that you can do and go and take that survey. If you're in one of my classes, it's already set up in D2L for you to do that. So please make sure that you fill out that survey. That gives us feedback to know what you thought about the panel, how informative it was, that type of thing. So please make sure to do that as well. And now I want to present our panelists with gifts. They're each getting
funding for great debates, power, politics, and people provided by the John Templeton Foundation through a grant from the Institute for Humane Studies.
Just a little gift set. It's got
facilities provided by Rose State College Professional Training Center.
Card holder for each of you. So I'll go ahead and pass those out that way. And we want to say very much thank you for participating.
I thought this was our gift.
On this. Well, we thought we'd move up just a little bit from the water from last time. So thank you again for you guys participating.